Welcome everyone to today's session. This is the third session of our Deep Retrofit Discovery series. This one's going to be focusing on the Expo Centre we're in here today. It's a successful exhibit of integrated project delivery. Just a heads up that this is being recorded. The intent for that is so that we can share this for those that couldn't attend, but this will be housed on Alberta Eco Trust's platform, and they'll be sharing this, or it'll be one of the 8 sessions that we will be sharing with this project. Today's agenda, we'll go through the land acknowledgement. I'll pass over to my colleague Jim Sandercock from Alberta Eco Trust to introduce the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. I'll introduce our Safe Green Building Technology Access Centre, and then I'll introduce the panel, and then we'll go through the presentation that we're here to see. We'll have a bio break if we need it. We'll open up to a panel discussion Q&A. So please have your questions. Don't hesitate. I want this to be, the intent of these is to get as many questions out and have a proper discussion, both on the topic of IPD as well as retrofitting buildings for that sake. And if you can join us, there'll be a tour. Dallin will be giving us a tour at the end of the session. Dallin?
Down.
Down. I got it right.
Okay. Good. I've been called worse.
No? All right, I'll start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional lands and territories of the Indigenous peoples who have lived on these lands and have taken care of them since time immemorial. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. What became known as the province of Alberta in 1905 is also the traditional and ancestral home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. This includes Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations. The Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani First Nations, the Cree, Dene, Nakota Sioux, Saulteaux, and the Métis Nation of Alberta. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today, and those have gone before us. So I'll pass it over to Jim Sandercock from Alberta Eco Trust.
Hello, everybody. Glad you could make it for today's both conversation and potential tour. So I'm Jim Sandercock. I'm one of the coaches with Alberta Eco Trust. Alberta Eco Trust has been around for about 30 years, and our primary objective with the trust fund was to provide grants for organizations that are doing environmental work. Recently, we stood up 2 different organizations within our larger organization around buildings. One of them is called NBIX, which stands for the Emissions Neutral Building Information Exchange, and the other one is the Retrofit Accelerator. So the Retrofit Accelerator, we are a charitable organization that grant money from Natural Resources Canada through the DRAVE initiative, and we are helping businesses and companies and building owners do retrofit studies on their buildings and then get retrofits done. NBIX is our long-term organization that is taking that sort of information and others to act as a library for the future, as well as providing training and other opportunities for businesses and organizations to work together around better buildings and energy efficiency. The program itself for us, we in the Alberta Eco Trust Retrofit Accelerator are helping companies and organizations that have different levels of understanding of what retrofits could be. And we're aiming to help organizations have deep retrofits and have attainable explanations as to what they can do for their buildings. And from that, be able to reduce their emissions. Our organization has sort of 3 steps. The very first step is to have free coaching. We're paid by the DRAVE Foundation, and so we're providing free coaching, helping building owners understand what can be done and tailor both the business case and the deep retrofit plan to that business's needs. We also have identified a number of different pre-qualified consultants, and we're working with other consultants as well to make sure that the scope of work that we would like delivered and that would help the company that owns the buildings, make sure that those projects can be done effectively to their goals. And then we're also working, if I go to the next slide, we're also working to increase the capacity of the market. And so there's a number of organizations that we're working with. I see Ken is right here in the room with Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance, and they're helping us to create a list of different vendors that have experience and the capacity to do retrofits for people's buildings. And we're trying to change the system of Alberta to really build out capacity. We're also sharing resources and tools through the NVIX group that we're developing and discovering as we move along. Again, the reason why this is in the first phase completely free is because we did get funding support from the Government of Canada through Natural Resources Canada and RBC. We have network participants like Energy Efficiency Alliance, Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance, SAIT, who's doing these sorts of case studies, as well as the Pembina Institute. And our money from DRE allows us to do that free work. When we get to the second stage, for companies that do want to investigate it further, we are working with pre-qualified consultants who will do retrofit plans. And those retrofit plans are not just including ASHRAE Level 2, but more. We examine water, and we have a lot of different metrics that are financial that are also in the program. And then if the participant wants to go on, they may want to do implementation of those projects. And in those cases, we've arranged with Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance different contractors that are able to do that work because they've got the right sort of skills and history, as well as identifying different finance options, as well as different grant options. And so with that, I'll hand it back to you, Dean. Thank you.
And just because I turned my phone off right now, I'll just a reminder to everybody to turn off your phones. And my apologies, I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Dean Jones. I'm a principal investigator, project manager, and lab supervisor here at our Green Building Technology Access Center on-site campus. And the reason why we're here is because of this Deep Retrofit Accelerated Initiative project that we're working underneath Alberta Eco Trust to do the retrofit discovery sessions, which we're here today, as well as market analysis. So our GBTAC mission as a whole is to prove, implement, and commercialize new building materials, systems, and methods that lead to the construction or retrofit of buildings to be higher efficiency, lower emission, healthier, and more environmentally friendly. We also aim to collaboratively create and de-risk holistic high-performance building solutions to address environmental, social, and economic realities. Lastly, we want to develop and provide training and support systems to upskill the residential and commercial construction industries. So you can see a picture on there. That's our facility on-site campus. If you're ever in Calgary and want a tour, by all means, reach out. That's an older picture now. We have a new sprung structure in the back of that front-facing structure with the solar panels. Some of our focus areas are energy management and renewable energy integration, advanced building and material science, as well as environmental and architectural ecology. So, like I said, that's a picture of our new sprung structure that's housing multiple new pieces of infrastructure. We're actually just in the midst of commissioning. One is a weathering chamber, which gives us the capacity to have a 8-foot by 8-foot wall section sandwiched between two compartments, one showcasing an exterior environment and one showcasing an interior environment. So the exterior environment, we're in the midst of commissioning, but we're trying to get it down to minus 30, minus 40. We have lighting, UV in there, as well as a spray rack for water. And on the inner side, we are going to be adding a heater and or humidifier to replicate interior environment. And as you can see there, some wall samples that we have as our wall library that we have, showcasing construction assemblies, mainly for the students on campus to come and check out, or any tours for that matter, any people wanting to come and learn. So these are retrofit discovery sessions. We've committed to 8 free educational networking sessions. We have 3 in Calgary in person, 3 in person in Edmonton, and 2 online. So currently this is our 3rd. We've done 1 in person in Calgary and 1 online. So the main purpose is to showcase retrofit case studies like we're here today. We're going to identify the skills and training gaps in the market as possible topics. We want to showcase available technologies and solutions for deep energy retrofits. We want to showcase the understanding of return on investment. That's a big topic as far as who's funding the retrofit. And other topics will come out of the woodwork as this larger project carries on until 2027. Another aspect of our project that we've committed to is market and gap analysis on retrofits. So we're going to try to identify, this is more of a desktop research. So identifying the training needs from building owners, industry professionals, or policymakers. We want to highlight learnings from other jurisdictions. There's lots of other jurisdictions that are a lot more further along than we are. Edmonton is a lot further along actually compared to Calgary, which is nice. Showcasing financial needs assessment, exploring code and regulatory impacts, and analyzing the barriers to accelerating retrofits, especially in the market, the Alberta market, I should say. So that's us and this project. So now we're going to move on and introduce our esteemed panel here that have been kind enough to dedicate their day or their afternoon to this. So first is Elise Weiss-Abel. I'd like to introduce Elise. She's an integrated project delivery facilitator and sustainability project manager with Stoke here in Edmonton. Elise leads clients to decarbonize by implementing collaborative strategies that prioritize sustainable outcomes from project inception. By integrating experts from various disciplines early on, she helps identify opportunities to reduce carbon emissions throughout the project lifecycle. This involves leveraging innovative technologies, optimizing building designs for energy efficiency, and advocating for renewable energy sources. Prior to Stoke, what's that? You don't need to go on? Next is Jesse Banford. With over 2 decades in construction and facility design, Jesse began his career with a hands-on perspective from working on construction sites. That foundational experience has shaped his journey through both the private and public sectors. Today, as the Director of Facility Infrastructure Delivery for the City of Edmonton, he leads the team responsible for bringing vital civic projects to life. His work has involved many different procurement models, giving him valuable insights into how innovative approaches like lean, integrated project delivery can drive success in complex new builds and retrofits. Next is, I'm going to screw it up. Dallin Hall. Dallin is a project manager with Delmore Construction. Dallin has been the general contractor's project manager from validation right through completion on this particular building, or on this Expo Centre, which was a lengthy 4+ year process. With many other integrated project delivery projects under his belt, Dallin was the right fit to lead the City of Edmonton through their first IPD project. Next, last but not least, Patrick Fleming. Patrick is the leader of the Buildings Engineering practice for Alberta at SEMA Plus. Patrick is a mechanical engineer with 29 years of experience and has led the design, planning, and commissioning of a wide range of buildings projects across Alberta and throughout Canada. His expertise lies in the renewal of institutional buildings, laboratories, and post-secondary facilities. A strong advocate for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the built environment, Patrick is currently focused on revitalizing existing buildings, such as retrofits, to support a low-carbon future. Thank you all for joining us. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Elise.
Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to share with you about our project here at the Expo Centre. It was a really great project to work on, the city's first IPD retrofit. And of course, this was a project that took over 4 years, so it's a great project that we worked on together. We have a few things here. We were trying to work with the city to meet some of their goals. The goal has some very aggressive targets to try to reach, so that was the main thing. There was a lot of different scopes. Like, this is a huge building, a lot of different scopes, so the team had to tackle what we could do, what needed to be done, and trying to work together to determine that plan. I am going to pass this on to Jesse, because Jesse from the city is the one that's going to talk about kind of what their plan was as a city and why they chose IPD.
Thank you very much, Lise, and thank you very much for having us here today. I'll jump into the first slide. I'm old school. I still need to print out all my stuff as I go. I'll be reading off. So first off, we're going to give a brief history of what this project is about. So the Edmonton EXPO Centre has a long history. It started as Northlands Agricom with the original halls A and D opening around 1983-84. So this used to house like your agriculture, your horses, cows. That's what it was designed for back in the day, 1983-84. We expanded in about 2009, and that's when it was renamed. So this rehabilitation project, which ran from spring of 2021 to the spring of this year. Focused on those original assets or the original pieces of these infrastructure from 1983 to 84, which is nearly 40 years old. So it's a long life of a lot of our assets or our infrastructure inside of it, near or beyond its end of life, and was built for a different use back in the day. So the problem with this facility was dealing with two major facilities. One was that aging infrastructure, as I just noted. The original halls were significantly deteriorating. Having never been rehabilitated since construction, systems were wearing out and the performance was declining. This is also a really high energy consumption building. When it first opened, the Edmonton EXPO was one of the city's most energy intensive buildings. So from an operational point of view and a tax-based point of view, when we look to where do we capitally invest and where do we make smart decisions, this is one of those things that you focus on. How do I, when we go to do some retrofits, how do I ensure that in the future that there's a good payback? So the project was essential to bring the older halls to a current building and safety codes. The city determined that simply reacting to the problems as they arose would be the most expensive and disruptive way to manage this building. So run to fail, as we were kind of running it, won't work. We needed to make a strategic decision of where we're going to invest and how we're going to do it. So the strategic importance of this project drives us to us, but really about the sustainable leadership. The project was driven by the city's goals to become an energy sustainable and climate resilient city. So that's part of our vision. It was an opportunity to lead the way into the transition and future-proof this over 500,000 square feet of an expo center. And it set the path to net zero. A primary goal was set for this facility to become emissions neutral, which is in line with our strategic lines of 2050. So why is this critical? Well, IPD. This is our first integrated project delivery project, and it was super exciting, something to go pilot on. We have never done it before. We thought, oh, what a great item to a massive scope. We need help to figure out what this is going to be, and this is why we said, let's pilot this, let's test this one out. And it was a team approach. And I didn't have these in my notes, but I wanted to make sure I did note it. And I wanted to say thank you to all the folks that were a part of this project. IPD was chosen to maximize collaboration and efficiency and bring everyone together. And it took a huge party, a poly party of 10. 10 members on this, so City of Edmonton was one of them. And the other 9 was 4 contractors, 4 consultants, and 1 facilitator. The 4 contractors, Delnor Construction, so it's our general contractor, prime contractor. Collins Steel, who was our structural contractor. Icon Industrial, our mechanical contractor. Alta Pro Electric, our electrical contractor. And they are, how do I say this, complemented with the consultant side of it and sub-consultants. So ACI Architecture, so like a Delnor, like the complement on a prime consultant, prime contractor. Inspire Consulting was the complement for the structural. SEMA Plus for the mechanical portion of it. And SMP Engineering on the electrical consultant. And a very important person to our team was Eco Ammo, who this being one of our first IPD projects, was very important to have an IPD facilitator and to help us guide of what makes this project successful. So a team approach was very important and was critical. It was also important to de-risk a very complex project with over 100 different work scopes and an aging operational building. An IPD model was invaluable for navigating the immense complexities. It was key to keeping the project on budget. And here I really like, which is a little bit different. We're designing to a budget. And that's a core principle of IPD model used here, a target value design. So we had over 100 different scopes, and we said we need to fix this building, make it so we can use it in the future, and how do I make it so meet within this budget? And we needed to hire a team to help us shape that and figure out what does this look like. So the team started with a budget and collaborated to design the best possible project for that price rather than pricing a finished design, which you typically see on other types of procurement models. And one that's predominantly used, which would be design bid build. So next slide, success in the business case. Well, this was an energy hog, and we needed to go from an energy hog to a green leader. The city made a decision by looking at the two sides of the coin. First, the major problem that we couldn't ignore, and second, the clear benefits of the strategic value that we could deliver upon. Making the business case like for like versus a path to net zero. The business case was clear. This was a proactive investment that solved urgent problems while creating a modern, sustainable facility. The problem that we couldn't ignore, an aging and failing building. 40-year-old halls were past their prime, and it was a major energy hog, as I had noted. The building was incredibly energy intensive. It's outdated, unsafe. The facility didn't meet modern building and safety codes, and it had a high cost of inaction. The city calculated that a reactive fix it as it breaks approach would be most expensive moving forward. We needed to get in front of it before it started just to fail. And there are examples of that out in the industry where that is some of the practice. We'll wait till it fails. Usually the most impactful and costly. So we got in front of it. The future benefits that were delivered was future-proofing this asset. The upgrades extend the Expo Centre's lifespan for decades. We are a public enterprise that we own, operate, animate, and maintain these facilities. So our focus is on that lifespan. How do we make our tax dollars go on longer, stretch further, and get the best return on investment? Massive cost savings. The project delivers huge improvements in energy efficiencies, from the new insulation and boilers to the solar panels, are all anticipated to generate between $250,000 and $500,000 in operational savings each year. Now, I have to say this, I say that with a bit of an asterisk. So all the calculations and engineers around the room that do these calculations would understand that there's a lot of variables in that. Electrical today, gas today are different prices than they were when we first did this validation report and looked at the payback period on it. And those will continue to fluctuate. But the trends would show where we're starting to go, where electrical would be potentially less expensive and gas more expensive. Not today, at least from a city perspective, where we're seeing it. But over time, you'll start to see the cost on that. Achieving city goals. Project directly supports Edmonton climate targets and puts the building on the path of emissions neutral. And we wanted to showcase leadership. It demonstrates Edmonton's commitment to sustainability with one of Canada's largest rooftop solar arrays. Success and key metrics. As a public enterprise or a public corporation, that first one's a huge one. We are fiscally responsible to the council and the residents and tax base, where we're looking to deliver on projects that meet the budget or better. We're on schedule or better and meet with purpose. So this project was just under 104 million, broken into a couple of phases, phase 1, 2. Phase 1 was urgent critical items. Phase 2 was the next pieces of like the D's, E's on our C's, D's, and E's within our renewal asset classification. And it was validated through the team to what it needed to include. And then the solar piece. Energy and emissions reduction. The project is expected to cut greenhouse gas emissions. The final numbers are still under review, as I had noted, as part of the closeout reports. But the installation of the new high-energy boilers alone cut the CO2 emissions by over 1,200 tons in a year. And the upgraded LED lighting cut lighting-related energy use by over 60%. The on-site sustainable power plant, or our crown jewel at the top, a rooftop solar, it was one of Canada's largest at the time. And I don't know if it still is, but I'm going to say it is. The Canada's largest urban rooftop solar array that was installed, noting to have 4.5 megawatt system with nearly 9,000 panels. It's expected to offset 1/3 of our building annual energy needs. And you say, well, how much does that look like? It's over 500 homes we're looking at. It roughly offsets over 500 homes from just that solar panel with a payback period of 10 to 17 years. Again, variables in the calculation, but for an asset that's 25 years, what a great investment. A complete overhaul. The building envelope was given a high performance skin, dramatically improving. So what I said at the beginning, what was this building used for? Agricom. We had a ceiling system of an R10 going to an R40. With the entire roof structure needed to be reinforced with today's codes and snow loads, and then the weight of the new solar array. So major, like when you think about buildings, you have the skin, the bones, your plumbing system, a mechanical system, and all those electrical, mechanical systems had to be replaced and modernized with the high efficiency equipment. And the operational success, and this was a huge one. It was critical. And remember, the time that we did this was during COVID. So we did have some opportunity where we could streamline some of the work and jump in front of it. But at the same time, when we went to open up those doors, we need to make sure that it's successful for our operational partners. They needed to be able to open up these doors and be able to regenerate revenue and get people to come in here. And from a construction point of view, that was a huge, huge item that we needed to work through. Couldn't have been done, I feel, without a great partner and team approach, a collaborative approach, which this contract offered, and to remain fully operational. And not only did we open up during the COVID and get people back in, this was also one of those places where if you needed to get those COVID shots back in the day, one of those centers, we also had that here. And we had to work around that and make sure that we were spaced far enough away and were able to not interfere with that. And the project created a safer and more accessible facility for all users. So is it successful? Absolutely. This is a great project. It is just on the final throes of it, and I'm looking forward to the final reports. But the early indicators from the validation report, when we were set out to how we're going to make this work and where we are today, I can stand here and say, what a success. Would I do it again looking back? Absolutely. This is a great project. That's me for my 4 slides. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. Happy to answer.
Cheers. Testing. That was a really great presentation, Jesse, on the city's commitment to this. And I just wanted to say, before I go on to my slides, the city really did break through the ice and really making green retrofit a mainstream thing in Alberta in this project, at least in my mind. I think the importance of this project, we'll look back in 10 years, and this is going to be one of the ones that really does set the pace for how we can get renewal happening in Alberta and doing it in a way that is reducing emissions and saving money. So one of our big challenges and opportunities, I guess, was this idea of a like-for-like replacement versus something, redefining and renewing the building. The infrastructure assessments that the city had in place were really focused on doing a like-for-like replacement. And what that means in this building is you had old gas-fired units on the roof that were serving agricultural halls. If we just replaced those for, similar, modern, slightly newer, slightly more efficient versions of those, we could have gotten some GHG reduction. We could have saved some cost on maintenance, but it really wouldn't have pushed the building further to the city's ultimate goals of being a net zero city in 2040. So we really had to take a step back on this and look at the operations of the building. It's not an agricultural hall anymore. It's a convention center. It's not animals anymore. It's people. People have different comfort requirements. The old halls weren't cooled. The new ones needed to be. And the GHG emissions and energy costs needed to be greatly reduced. And so we had to take a step back and look at this from a fresh approach. And this is where IPD and the power of the IPD team really comes into play. This is a very complex renewal. Very large building with a lot of moving parts in it, and the lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. So the team sat together and really hashed out what were the energy saving measures that we could do, the ECMs, and were these the same things as renewal? Were these the same things as retrofit? And are these things maintenance savers? And working with the city at the table, their maintenance people, working with the contracting team at the table, we're able to identify not just sort of the energy saving ideas, but actually define them as construction scopes and cost scopes, and really put them together and challenge them in a path. And this is the path to net zero. And it's really something you can only do with all of the expertise at the table. This thing's really slow. So this is sort of a refined version of that, what comes out of that. And we call this the path to net zero at the time. I know that's a bit of it's a loaded phrase, but what we're really trying to do is point out that the city wants to renew this building and have it net zero by 2040. How do we get there? So you have to work backwards. And imagine you could do some retrofits to this building that would be of value, like say we put in some high efficiency gas-fired equipment on the roof that saves a lot of energy, reduces some emissions. The problem is that doesn't get us to the 2040 goal. It's better, but at some point you'd have to rip that stuff off the roof and redo it to get where you needed to be. So in our path to net zero, that's a red square. It's a dead end. You know, maybe it's an improvement, but that's not getting us where we need to be. So we go through primary upgrades, secondary upgrades, tertiary upgrades, and we follow the green path. And the green path is the one that's going to get you to the net zero plan. And the red ones are dead ends, would need rework. So this is just one piece of that matrix. The actual matrix is much larger than this, and there's a lot of options, and it's very complicated. But in following a green path on this, you can actually navigate as a building owner, as a contracting team, as a consulting team. What are the right things to do now that will get us in the path later? So the primary upgrades that we did now, the hydronic system that allowed us to put in ground source heat pumps later, or a district energy system later. These are the things we do now that maybe aren't the most immediate GHG reducers, but in the long run, and the goal of the building, that's going to get us where we need to go. And in doing this, you have a living document that can live with the building and can assist in planning the next stages, the next retrofits. So this type of planning, again, the key to it being really the IPD environment and having all the people at the table and all the people invested in a solution with a budget and a mandate really does make something different. Some of the challenges, again, just aligning the broad scope. So, we have lots of players at the table, mechanical engineers and builders and electrical engineers and structural engineers and architects that all want a piece of something to do, and a limited, a loosely defined contract budget, scope of work. And we all worked together to really define what that was. And in doing this, we really did, the target value design was always the touch base in how we stay on budget, but maintain the scope with something that's executable. Another big challenge was normalizing the current emissions with the actual system requirements. So this is where you have to accept that the building was never designed for what it's doing right now. We have 5,000 people shows in here. It was never designed for that. It was designed for animals. So it wasn't cooled. It wasn't ventilated properly. So we have to accept that the emissions reductions are for what the building is now, not what it was originally was. So you have to accept that it's a cool building now, and that's sort of the baseline, not the animal barn it was, okay? And sort of the last point that we wanted to bring up was aligning budgets and maintenance objectives and energy targets. So there's all these competing or seemingly competing aspects to the project. We're spending money on capital to save maintenance money, to save utilities money, reduce GHG emissions, and these are all moving targets. These are all balls in the air. Strangely, ultimately, when we look at the ECMs and we have the costing power of the IPD team behind it, clarity comes out of the fog. In this environment, we're able to put accurate costing and scope and schedule to ECMs, sort of these pie in the sky energy saving measures, and put something together that really is an effective path to where we got to. And I would say this building is, it's well on its way to being a net zero building. And this is sort of like our feel-good slide here. We saved an awful lot of CO2 emissions, though, as Jesse said, those numbers are calculated numbers at this point. They're not verified by actual utility data at this point, but we're on target to reduce the emissions in this building by 50% by 2040. And between the solar, the high efficiency combustion products, the improvements to the building envelope, it's night and day what this building is over what it might have been had we not followed this type of planning. I think that's me. Now, James.
You're up.
I'll start this off by asking a question that we probably should have asked an hour ago. Who doesn't know what IPD is? Everybody kind of knows? Kumbaya, drinking the Kool-Aid. One hand up. Perfect. Okay. I've done a few of the panel. I'm the IPD guy. That's pretty much all I've done. Yes, it's a lot of kumbaya. It's a lot of collaboration. I know collaboration's a buzzword, so in my opinion, what does that truly look like? But right from the onset, the city being a massive player in that, because from anybody who's done IPD or knows about IPD, knowing that the City of Edmonton is going to try an IPD probably scares everybody, because that's not typically the entity that you'd imagine that wants to be a part of that environment. And honestly, they led the charge the whole way. So we were brought on board with a team procurement back in early 2021. There's two different ways to procure IPD teams. You can either team procurement or a waterfall method. Our team was procured. We did have some legacy contractors that had done some work in the building that had a lot of information that was going to be apparent and super helpful, because we found out the as-built for this building were non-existent. So our team did a ton of work when we got brought on board. That what we found for as-built was mechanical and electrical drawings in a mechanical room that we had to take to Riley's and go get scanned and printed, because that's about all we had. So tons of work was done in 2021 to validate this project. I'm gonna jump in the next slide. As of right now, this is a pretty drone shot that we got all of about a week ago. So from a traditional process, and it's funny, if we did this presentation about probably 2 months from now, we actually have a co-op student in our office who's doing a comparison between traditional CM for a rehab versus IPD, and what the pros and cons and savings look like. He was asking me for, hey, what can I do for an end of term paper? I said, I got a perfect one for you. This sounds great. Especially with Delnor doing the convention center rehabilitation project in the same window and same time span. To compare the two projects side by side, it makes too much sense almost. So from a traditional process, Jesse, Pat can definitely touch this, but bringing the contractors on board earlier, and even from not just even the contractors, but let's bring the people on site who are actually doing the work to the table that can actually tell you, hey, what's the usable lifespan of some of what we're hypothesizing about, versus looking at an ASHRAE document that might say, hey, it's 25 years, it must be replaced year 26. Like, no, that's not necessarily the case. There's going to be ups and downs all over the place. Let's talk about what this realistically looks like. So like, I'll never forget, Hank from Icon, him and I were up on the roof one day. We were charcoal rubbing all of the license plates, or all the plates of all the units, so that we could actually get all of the as-built information, so we could truly determine what some of the information off this. I can guarantee Pat's team wasn't going to do that. They needed the contractors to go do that. So what typically, and hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, the city's goal really for a lot of these is how quickly can we get to checkpoint 3? And checkpoint 3 is when can we get funding approved so that some of these projects can take the next step within the given budget cycle. We were under a significant time constraint, especially during COVID. One hall was doing vaccinations, one hall was doing testing. We were all in masks, we were all virtually, but we had to present a work scope and validation report for phase 1, so like it could get into the SCBA in 2021. Sounds weird. Of which at the time we took all of the F-rated items. We started to prioritize some of those. As Jesse said, we had about 100. We got to about 17 and said, hey, this is what we can do for, can't remember what the original $39-ish million. We started to work our way through that, obviously, as we were coming out of COVID. We, as a team, it made too much sense for us to then submit the validation report for phase 2, which ended up being an additional 59 or so million, of which as you start to open up the building, you start to realize how much more critical some of the replacements are in this building. So it included a ton of envelope, but the new entrance 6 you potentially came in, depending on where you came in. But even as Patrick said, the walls were 2 layers of tin, one layer which was a perforated panel that had what used to be 1 inch of insulation that had been pressure washed over and over and over. There was no insulation in the walls. There was nothing in the walls. Some of the old roofs, specifically in the skylight, was an old gravel ballasted roof from 1982. It was original. It's been on for years. We found a lot of stuff. Just seeing if there's anything here that's... So yeah, as a team, we started to build the initial work scopes list. So what was originally a building condition assessment that was done prior to us being brought on board, we somewhat did that, but on steroids. So we were co-locating upwards of 2 days a week. Our Google folder structure is organized chaos, but we have photos of every building, every room, every door, every panel, every light, to say what's the ranking of this, photos of everything, so that if anybody were to ever need to get somewhere in the building to see what it looks like in the tunnel in this quirky little quadrant, you don't have to strap on your PPE and go for a walk, because you'll find out on this tour it's a long walk. There was originally only a half hour dedicated for this tour. You need a lot longer than a half hour to get anywhere in this building, because it is what it is. So then as a team, yeah, as Patrick said, there's a little bit of infighting. Everybody says my stuff is priority F. We need to replace my stuff. So sometimes it takes the city to say, hey, no, this is what's best for the next 40 years of this building versus what's best for the next 5-10 years. And we all have a little bit of say into what it might look like from our vantage point. And maybe the mechanical team sees something different than the electrical team might be, but structural overrules everything. So there's quite a few items structurally that we had to do quite significant replacements of. So as we walk through the hall, you'll see in between every single existing joist, there is a new I-beam to take on the new snow load, not only for the new roof replacement, but for the new solar. So there is, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of tons of steel in this building, but having Enspire and Collin Steel as a part of the team was massive, of which doesn't seem apparent at the onset when you talk about $100 million rehab, but having them at the table and being able to assess anything and everything has been super, super helpful. I guess I'll touch on the last point there, just in regards to interdependencies. And I think that's something that's difficult to quantify, and especially from a client's perspective, saying, hey, here's what I want to replace. What else does it affect? And I think that's where having a lot of the right people at the table, we can hypothesize from all of our lessons learned of doing a lot of the rehabs across the city, across the province, wherever. But I think the one thing that the IPD team did a really good job at capturing is what are the unforeseens that the team takes the risk on, or then says, hey, no, this is a client risk. And I think as a building owner and operator, that's always something that's forefront, is what does the contingency look like on a project like this? Because if you read what it looks like from a book value, 10 to 15%. We carried 3.8 or 4. So truly quantifying what does our risk log looks like? What does a factored risk allotment look like? And then how are we managing it? So actually, within the team, we have about 25 different pits, we call them, mechanical, electrical, team building. We had a pit for team builders. We had everything. We had a risk pit. We met every couple of weeks. And actually the pit leader was our City of Edmonton project manager, Brad Watson. And honestly, it's probably for the best, because I know I've built a lot of risk logs. They're only as good as the person managing them, and it's garbage in, garbage out. So how do you keep it at the forefront? And it's Brad every couple of weeks saying, hey, Dallin, what's the update on this risk? How have you mitigated it? What's the plan look like here for the next month? Is this allotment potentially too conservative, too ambitious, et cetera? So having Brad at the forefront for that is huge. And then this gets a little bit more into kind of what our validation strategy looked like. So yeah, honestly, I'm gonna skip forward and then skip back. So this is what kind of our validation pull plan of sorts looked like. We hummed and hawed whether to do this digitally or in person, but obviously it was peak COVID, so doing it in person didn't work super, super well. So we did it all on Google to talk about how are we prioritizing some of these scope investigations, budget investigations. But yeah, truly, when we submitted our validation report, I can send it to you. It's a full binder. It's like 1,400 pages. It's an absolute bear to read. take that for what it's worth. There's a lot of like lead paint abatement reports and stuff like geo reports that take up 100 pages. But to truly say, hey, here's what we can do for this amount of money, this budget, this schedule, et cetera. As a team with the city leading, we talk about what our values as a team were. And budget was number one. Dallin, here's how much money you have. Don't come at me for a penny more because this is all we got. What was funny is schedule was like way down here. And Jesse says, yeah, we were on schedule. The schedule was actually probably about, and it's offered as a contractor. My superintendent and I were like, well, schedule doesn't matter. But honestly, from the city's point of view and the facility operator's point of view, if the schedule were delayed, it was probably because we tried to fit in big events that came to the building and we ended up pushing it farther downstream. So if the overall portfolio budget didn't change, it really didn't change a whole ton because the city was able to generate more revenue, which coming out of COVID was huge. So a lot of times I was a glorified event planner because I'm in their software trying to block off windows for days and weeks at a time, of which this facility, I think they currently advertise that there's like 1.4 million people that come through this building every day, and events that like you've never even heard of, like coming in like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, like thousands of people every week that we had at any given time between 40 and 150 contractors working. And most people that I talked to in the city didn't even know we were doing work here. And I think that was probably the goal and appreciated from everybody, especially the facility. But yeah, so as a group, we had a lot of deliverables for validation, and I'll talk kind of phase one validation as phase two was kind of done as we were doing a lot of construction. But to truly define what are the milestones, what are the conditions of satisfaction, what does this look like from a project team perspective, and then what does that validation report look like? So I know that was taken to SCBA, and then for phase two and for the additional solar funding was all checks and balances through the city to ensure that we were meeting the appropriate targets. And then, yeah, really go, no go in September of 2021. And we have our final City of Edmonton building permit inspection Thursday. So this Thursday. So of which you can imagine for all the permits and sub-permits in a building like this, there's like 11 of us walking because you need to hold the inspector's hand because they have no clue what we did because the drawing package is 500 pages, Jamal, and like they're saying, yes, this is what we did. Come look at this. Don't look over here. That was already there. That's fine. So kind of the last slide, just to kind of talk about, this was actually built for a previous presentation, but this is kind of what it looks like getting to checkpoint 3. So this was a comparable project for getting to a design build. And I think this is where IPD truly gets a lot of value, is how quickly can you get the right players at the table to validate that this project makes sense financially. So there's a lot of different ways to get to a validation contract because you don't necessarily have to use a CCDC 30, of which they have a new 2025 version coming out here just shortly. But how quickly can you get to some sort of budget certainty from a client perspective? And probably a lot more that I can get into detail up here, but pull me aside on the tour and I'm happy to chat your ear off. So this, and you'll get to see this on the tour, but here's a piece of equipment that wasn't previously in the ceiling, but I think what's worth highlighting in this is just the amount of structural reinforcement required. So specifically for the mechanical, what used to be 6 units on the roof is now upwards of 14 on the roof for each hall and within the hall. So a significant addition to structural load, snow load, et cetera. But yeah, you can see having a structural contractor, very necessary, but you can see upsizing that entire main truss, as well as new beams kind of all the way through, of which a 50,000 square foot hall is very easy to rig beams into. I'll show you some of the offices where we had to do it in. It's not quite as easy. We were relocating offices, people in offices. I'll say as far as a general contractor goes that doesn't do a ton of self-perform, we were glorified event planners and like movers in a lot of cases. So it's been fun. A couple other photos, and then hopefully we can get to a little bit of a tour and a Q&A. So the solar will get all of the limelight for this project. Looks super sexy. It's going to get all the LinkedIn posts, but honestly, it was all the work of all the teams that isn't just the solar team, because there's so much that goes into being able to get that solar array on the roof, from structural to all of the roof replacements to like every single, I guess not the area that we're currently below, but nearly every roof had the roof replaced along with all of the solar, so that the lifespan of your roof is now that much longer. So there was some educated decisions and direction that was made of selectively choosing roofs that had some life cycle left in them versus, hey, no, it's 18 years past, you probably only have 4 or 5. Let's rip the Band-Aid off potentially early so that you don't have the cost to take the solar on, solar back off when the time comes. So it was we had a decision matrix that kind of allowed us to make some of those decisions as a group, but very important decisions to make when you're talking solar at this scale, especially for an existing facility. So remind me, Q&A first.
Did you want to buy a break or did you?
Yeah, how's everyone doing? We get right into questions?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not break it up.
Did you want to go to the 3 that are on the slide or do you want to open it up to?
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah,
Let's have burning questions. Let's get the questions out right now.
I think he's asking if you can get some drinks and water. So yes, absolutely.
If people want to talk on stage or into craft and choose something,
Sure. Maybe. Question, and it may have been covered earlier on and I just missed it, but in terms of funding for this project, City of Edmonton funding only?
That's correct.
Okay, so the question is related to the fact that in some grant programs, it's required that we are showing like a savings base. Sorry, the selection of the baseline is important, I guess is what I'm saying. Here we're saying, we've all accepted that it's not the same baseline from 1983, where the baseline is now human occupancy. And although there was not comfort cooling, the baseline will assume that it was comfort cooling when we're showing savings? Yes? Yes. And that was fine because it's self-funded and there's no requirement to meet.
So it is funded by the City of Edmonton. So we have a composite that focuses on our medical composites, which is grossly funded. Our funding for that's roughly about 30% of optimum. And so to your question, how do we need to demonstrate savings from renewal? Is that what your question is?
I think so. It's just because it's in general, the fact that we selected a different baseline. There's nothing to prove to external agencies, really.
Yeah, well, so the use of the building has changed. However, the components within the building had not. So when you say, did the baseline change? Well, the use of it changed. And so you could start from the baseline of that. We've been operating out of this facility. And so the last renewal or the additions was back in 2009 when it was renamed to the Edmonton EXPO. Of which when you start to see it used more as a convention center, not an acre comp. So we do have enough metrics to say that would be the baseline of what we're operating under and is jumping into a building that was designed for something else. And based off of that, we need to now get it to date or update it to current codes and make it more of a sustainable or a operational efficient from a fiscal point of view. Time to jump in there and make those adjustments. So yes, we would have had a baseline over the time.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I have another question, but I want to save it and let other people ask it. Oh.
don't play them awful.
No, that's fine. That's fine. My name's Chris. I'm just curious about the solar array. If you have your dashboard up at this time to demonstrate performance value for the taxpayer.
As of right now, I'll call it a Solus dashboard because that's who built our dashboard. Phase 1 is currently operational, and the intent is to actually have it on a few TVs out in the lobby. I'm not sure what the city's goal is. I don't know if it's similar to convention center and where that dashboard might live. It's not updated to reflect phase 2 currently, but phase 1 is fully operational, and I'll say it's data that I've never seen before at that scale. I'm used to doing little schools. It's got 400 or 500 panels. Not, I think phase one is 5,500 panels. So it's neat data to see for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation. All of you. Very well done. I'm really curious, as a team, what would be your top 3 takeaways to other building owners? Having gone through this experience, what kind of advice would, so City of Edmonton's taken a great leadership role, backed up by a fantastic team. There's tons of building owners who need help. What would be your top 3 pieces of advice? That's question 1. I didn't have the questions.
Well, I've got a few. Something that was, I guess, unique here, or at least taken to another level here, was the amount of study that went in advance. So we did this path to net zero study, as we called it, but what it was a scoping report and really attaching real time costing and energy saving to our plan. So the advice, I mean, in this case, this was extremely beneficial for the owner. This is a very complicated building, but I think the advice to the owners out of this is the upfront study is worth it. I mean, smaller buildings is, obviously you're going to scale it back a bit, but whatever the necessary level of upfront study is to define how you're going to be retrofitting the building in your future, to have a plan for your building for the next 20 years is very valuable.
I think from my chair, what probably led the most value, and it's different than most jobs Delmar had ever done before, was to have the PM, the superintendent, everybody on site with the facility operators day to day, every day. Like Delmar PMs are typically in the office, we get locked up, we don't get let out. The fact that I came over to Delmar and it was, no, I'm going to go to site, the value is going to be there, but to fully integrate myself with the facility so that I can jump in front of some of what they potentially don't see because they live in somewhat of a narrow vision because they're worried on the events that are happening this week and next week. And I can see in their schedule, in their models, here's what next summer looks like. We need to be able to jump in front of some of that. Like I know just the co-location that a lot of IPDs kind of talk about. Like we had a full on-site office, bathrooms, great Wi-Fi. We made it awesome for all the consultants to be there. To have 2 days a week where all of us were there as a team to say, hey Jamal, I got a question, let's go for a walk. And to have that answer within an hour, that was awesome. And that's not something that every project or every client potentially prioritizes. And I know IPD typically does it. And it's something that I'm trying to figure out ways to carry into other delivery models and for different scopes of projects, because not every job is a $100 million rehab in a 500,000 square foot building. So what's transferable to other projects and other delivery models? That's one front of mind for me, is how do you create like a CM plus that prioritize those types of things that financially the owner sees the benefits of.
That co-location actually continued right through construction, and even the foreman and the consultants and everything were in the same space, and it allowed for quick answers to questions. So if the mechanical foreman had a question, right away he was in there, we were answering questions, things were being answered. In a facility like this where we only had small windows to do the work because a new event was coming in, those answers had to happen quickly. And so really that was key to being a big success here.
I like all their answers. For me, I will say, from the city perspective, we do lots of projects. And my involvement in projects are usually at the front end. Starting up a project, looking at it, or getting involved if something's going off rails or there's issues. This project, I got to come out on a quarterly basis, get updates from the teams. What a strong collaborative team. So from a lessons learned, I didn't have to be really involved. I got to hear what was going on, huge support, help drive where we want from a strategic point. From a lessons learned, how would I say, could we do this again? Or inform owners, emphasize your tangible cost savings. So when you think about your business case, and I said at the beginning, one of the key successes was on time and on budget. We want that on purpose. So on purpose is huge, and aligning those goals of what that purpose is in that business case is huge. And I hear people out on site, that's huge, because how do we communicate and confirm that we are on the same page, that we are aligned to where we need to collaborate, where we need to go if we're not here communicating. So that to me is a huge win. Emphasizing again on tangible cost savings. So when you start to align what the goals are, know what you're wanting to achieve and how that's going to happen. And those tangible things are things that people can latch on to. If I invest here, here's my return on investment, and this is why I should invest on it. Aligning with your strategic goals is huge. When we talk about a business case, looking back to what are we trying to accomplish and where's that going to go into the future, and are we aligned? Quite often I see business cases that are just, we should do this. Well, does that align with where we're wanting to go as a municipality or what our governors are wanting us to do? So those are a couple ones. We can keep going.
Yeah, no, I thought the other one that you guys raised, I thought would be a real winner with virtually every building owner was the improved quantification of risk.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Second follow-up question, and I'll turn the mic back so others have a chance. So Jesse, you talked about it. Patrick, you talked about it. I'm really curious. So, Valerie mentioned, so it was a team procurement. So you bring this incredible team together. You got a world-class facilitator who understands IPD backwards and forwards and stock. But Jesse, you're saying as a building owner, you want to keep this plan live long after this team is gone, right? So how do you foresee doing that?
Again, aligning the vision and the goals of the team at the beginning. So the way decisions were made, and again, I didn't have to be a part of a lot of the decisions. It was more of like, this is from the project management team of this is based off of the validation report where we're going to go and where we're recommending and where we're proceeding. A lot of that was done within the teams. And the way that ours was structured, a 10 poly party where the City of Edmonton took 6 votes. So we had to have all in agreement, has to have consensus when we wanted to move forward with something. By the city having 6 seats at that vote can help push the direction, but everybody had a chance to speak why it had best value. And the importance why the city was, to your point, Ken, we're going to be the building owner, and we needed to have a strong voice that this is the vision of where we wanted to go and to help help shape or influence where it was going to go. Does that answer your question, Ken?
Yeah, sorry, I was a little unclear.
Okay.
I'm more interested in, so city's got a vision and a plan for maintaining the building 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Yep.
But you're not going to have the same team around you that built it for you. That's what I'm curious about. How to maintain that momentum 15 years from now that you've built up through the initial project?
That's a great question. I'm not 15 years out, don't know the answer to that. But I'll pass it over to Patrick. But to start with, I will say how we started the project, building a BIM. So we all worked off of a similar model to work with, which would be transferred over. But anyways, Patrick, will that's true.
At a minimum, the city is left with a huge amount of as-built and operations and maintenance data. Okay, so this report and the actual published version of that report is a much thicker document. You have the as-built model, BIM model of the building, and you have all of the operational data and all of its equipment, the shop drawings for controls, and I think there's a few notes in here and there that are actually get preserved over too. But if a new consulting team, say, the city never wanted to see us again, and they hired a new team, and they picked up all this stuff, they'd be starting from a lot further ahead than we were, and they would have a lot of opportunity to carry on with what the city's needs are. So, I mean, nothing's perfect in the sense that intentions can change in 10, 20 years, but we've done everything we can to make sure the information is there to do the next thing, to reassess in the context of where they are then and do what the city needs in the future.
And I think just the one thing to add from a construction perspective, what we tried to have a little bit of influence on too, is just how much involvement the facility operators had as a group and how involved they were with our team. So everything from having all of them at our site barbecues, me walking through and checking in with the events team and the security team and the food and catering team, and they all knew all of us by name, just to have that transfer of knowledge, because we know we're not here anymore, but the amount of long-term employees that have been here for 2 decades or more, that we can talk about some of the decisions that were made, because they're going to be the ones that have to live with a lot of these decisions. Is, hey, how involved can you be? And obviously, not everybody can be as involved as they'd like, but to say, hey, here's why we made a lot of the decisions, and here's how we can kind of help you throughout the process and after we leave. So,
One little other thing to add here from a selfish business point of view. We developed a lot of younger engineers who are senior engineers on this project and similar projects. There's a growing stable of talent and understanding in the business that knows how to do this now. It's from my point of view, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and we're in a real growth phase in this business. We're developing an awful lot of talent with a whole lot of new skills right now.
sorry, just doing a quick time check. I assume we probably want to start the tour around 3:30. We probably got time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. And then honestly, if you want to grab any of us while we're walking, there's lots of times to walk and talk, because it's here, there, and everywhere to get around the building. So, any more questions? Perfect. 2.
Hi, Christy from Nate. I was just wondering, you said you went to validation and you had a part of your budget. So of the project budget, about how much did validation cost?
Oh, man, I'm gonna say we were like 1.1 million on a $39 million project. I should know this better because I assumed I was going to get asked. Because we did some comparables just in relation to what that looks like for CM. That was about where we were standing. No offense to the engineers at the table, they're a little bit more expensive. If you can validate a project with some cheaper resources, it's going to get you to that point a little bit quicker. But let me dig into that. I could probably find it in an email here as we're walking. So.
Sure, and from the city, you only have the budget validation, you have to go back for the rest.
Yeah, so that's correct. So the part of our PDDM model, so project development delivery model, a portion of it is set up for the development piece. And as I think it was Dallin, I was saying, the eagerness to get to checkpoint 3, and that's when the project has been developed enough and it's mature enough that we know what the scope is. So we invest at the upfront before we see too much cost, and we go back to our governors, our council, and say, hey, we got a good business case. We have a good understanding of what it is, how much it's going to cost, and how long. And then they say yes, go or no go at that point, which we call as checkpoint 3. We go to our governors and say, we're mature enough, we think it's going to cost this amount, and then they invest into it.
Thank you.
So I'll just make a note that I don't necessarily we can maybe cut the tour a little bit short if we have running questions. That is a good, we're in
Just one more question.
got a good flow going on. I'll keep it going.
My question was also about validation, in the sense of what is the process of the validation? So the budget that was assigned, is it evolving? Is there some sub-metering systems involved? What's the broad level, like what's the process?
Yeah, so validation, what you're talking about is the measurement verification style process, right? So IPD validation is actually a little different, but we don't need to worry about that. So the energy model was done in, I believe it was done in IES originally in the project. So we came up with, our estimates of where it's going to be. We don't have like a formal M&V process in this, but we do have, let's just say, an expansive control system with a lot of data points in it. So the city is absolutely farming their energy consumption and GHG reduction and water consumption out of this. And I don't know what the city, how they present that data, but I think it's something the city takes very seriously about, presenting as a success.
Yeah, so part of our capital budget. So we twice a year, we would, or at the beginning, every 4 years, we talk about how much we're getting capital and we're going to sink in for operating. We now have what is a carbon tax budgeting as well. So we're starting to look at, from a capital profile, how much GHG is being offset and being accounted for. And it's become part of our accounting process. And how we measure and verify those are continuing to evolve. Like your question on the baseline, what should the baseline be? Those are the questions that will continue to evolve. But you got to start somewhere and to demonstrate.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That answers it. And can you say what control system you chose for your building lamination?
It's Siemens.
Thank you.
I have a question. You're both equipped. I just have, it's Tim Wilson with Retrofit Canada, and I have 2 questions about the IP experience of the city. So was there any data collected from, just because IDP is still, I don't know if it's leading edge of project management, but it's still new, and you're hearing about it a lot actually in Canada, and we actually have connections still that that's being a little more, but anyway, she's checked or it's just staff.
Probably Stephanie. Yeah.
Did you guys collect data about participant experience on the project team?
So highly efficient teams, is that what you're getting at? Which was a huge thing from our, and I'm guessing this is what you're talking about. So ensuring that a collaborative team, we had metrics that, I can't remember the 5. Darren, you'd probably be able to speak to this much better, but there was a number of high fives and there was a number of, you would speak better to this.
Yeah.
Yes, you help manage this.
Are you sort of asking how we managed the health of the team, or are you asking for?
Like, were there participant surveys? Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we did a quarterly team health check. So before as the project started, we created team values. Just like you would set up project values, we set up team values. So what kind of things did we want as a team? We wanted, trust and respect for each other and communication, different things like that. So we created a set of team values, and from that, we created a team health survey. And we checked in on that on a quarterly to say, how is the team doing? Where are we doing well? What can we continue doing? And where do we maybe need to make some adjustments to improve? Because we want to make sure that as a team, we're continuing to work together well. As most of you guys know, in any relationships, and this is a big team relationship, at the beginning, things always are great because you're working together, everything's new, everything's kind of that honeymoon stage, right? As you get in, this is a 4-year project of lots of work, lots of trials, things thrown our way, pivoting, whatever. So you're going to naturally see some tensions build and stuff. So we want to make sure that we were checking on a regular, making sure that we were making those adjustments and making sure that that team health stayed as good as it could.
I was going to say one thing we also did at a site level is we rolled these surveys right down to all the field workers, of which was somewhat uncommon, but to actually get a lot of feedback from those workers on site that really they're going to make or break the project. And the amount of feedback we had that we were able to implement, one of which being, hey, we love the site barbecues. It's like, okay, for $12 a head, if that's going to make you happy to come to work for a few weeks and the payoff is worth it, okay, we'll take some of the scrap copper out of the building, pay for some barbecues, and we have that much improved efficiency for weeks and months at a time. Super, super helpful. The one thing I will say as well is just because of the IPD environment, the ability we were able to talk about, I'll say mental health, and personally very, very important in my world and my heart is how do we talk about this daily, make it front and center, and to have all 10 of us at the table and be able to ask those real questions and then carry it right down to the field level. How do we provide the right resources to those people that truly are struggling more than the average in the world, of which we've got some bad averages right now and some bad statistics, and how do we do a little bit better? And I think that's super important, and IPD kind of lets you have some of those conversations that takes it the next step further. So hope that answered it, as well as giving you a little bit.
And my follow-up question is for the City of Edmonton. Do you know if this is going to be adopted for any in their products, or are they in there?
So yeah, this was our first IPD. We have another 2 on the go right now. So one's a fire hall and the other one's a transit, a fleet and transit center. Both currently in flight. So this will be, we have 3 IPDs so far. Yeah, we'll continue to test out different models as we go.
Any others?
I have a quick question.
Just tell me.
So, as you know, retrofit project is a usually complex project. You don't know what you're facing. Open the roof or you see something else. You open the mechanical system and see, oh my God, non-continuous. Do you think IPD is a proper approach to take your retrofit project? And if yes, how you can actually let the owner and the developer know when they are going to benefit, from IPD for.
I was going to say, I have a really good case example, but honestly, from my perspective, especially because you have your mechanical and electrical players at the table, you have all of their rates, you have all of their costs somewhat upfront, and they can provide some of that rough order of magnitude pricing as you're uncovering some of those unforeseens. Like as we're ripping the roof open, our original plan was to actually go to mechanically fastened roof assembly. One of the sections we opened up of the roof, there's conduit running through the flutes of the roof, of which that wasn't anywhere that we would have expected. So we ended up flipping to a totally adhered system, somewhat on the fly, of which that decision had to come fast because there was an event moving into that hall in 2.5 months. Similarly, like just because we were so time constrained in some of the windows and some of the halls, that to have Altabro, Priority, Collins, Dillon were somewhat on staff and standby saying, hey, this is probably a $7,000 impact for our risk and contingency perspective. We're going to move money from here to there. You're going to get paid. We're going to have paperwork that's going to reflect the design change that we're making on the fly. But keep going. We have to keep going because we have to get this area, hall, et cetera, operational, life safety inspected, et cetera, before events could move back in. I think that's where IPD truly could flex its muscles is we had to go fast. Decisions had to be made fast. And we're in a transparent financial model that you can do some of those things without arguing over, hey, that subcontractor padded a change order, like let's argue about $5,000. It's like, no, $5,000 doesn't matter right now. The home and garden show has to go in 6 weeks. Like, go.
Certainly for this project, with the scale of it and the amount of scoping that was done in the upfront validation phase, it was huge value here. Now, that's not to say this is all a one size fits all. I think a smaller scale project, one where there's been pre-design work, and it may not be valuable to go with a full meal deal IPD, but you can certainly borrow aspects and tools that the IPD has developed. Construction, of course, evolve in culture and environment. Things change. I wouldn't say you have to, adopt, IPD to the letter for every project. That'd be it's silly. I think you could certainly learn a lot from projects like this and apply what you need to where you're going. The big thing is to get the right expertise on your project for the time that's needed, and how do you accomplish that? And in this case, it worked very well.
And you, with this being solar being one of the showcase pieces, just under 5 megawatt system, I guess I'm curious to know who is the champion behind that, and how is that size system decided?
Jesse, I was going to say.
Yeah, so we do have a dedicated solar program for the City of Edmonton as part of our sustainability and the goals to become a carbon neutral net zero. So we already have a budget set aside for this. So when we do any renewals or rehabs, this is one of the business cases that we look into it. And that's the reason why it's a third part of the budget, the ask, because we have a budget set aside specifically for it. And if the business case situates and makes sense, then we'll invest into it. Sometimes when we do renewals or rehab, it's not worth it, the return on investment, because the amount of structural renewal that I'd have to do to accommodate the increased weight, it doesn't make sense. So for that renewal, it would go towards council and say, hey, this is a good opportunity to invest in, because it's not. But this one was, and any of our renewals, we will do that, have that look.
At least, did you want to pick, if there's no other questions, you want to pick one of those ones that we had?
Yeah. But we do have two or three, but.
Okay, well,
Kind of talked about that a little bit.
We did is IPD the most proactive measure?
Yeah, that was the first one.
I did have a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Here. With the retrofits scenario, and see, getting understanding during the project, did you end up being able to actually deliver the whole scope that you validated?
I will let Dallin answer that. However, I will say we had more than we had anticipated. So through the constant efforts of the team coming together, of where do we find efficiencies and opportunities? So part of the IPD is we also have a wish list. And if we had so much savings, where do we want to invest first and with our priorities? And so this one actually saw quite a few investments on our wish list, but I'll actually have Dallin answer.
I'll say yes and no. And I say this, being the guy managing the contingency and the funds on my side of the line, because we ended up moving so fast for some areas, it's very difficult to quantify what did you validate for and what should we have validated for if we would have known better. So there's a lot of conversation over what's a foreseen unforeseen and what's an unforeseen unforeseen. And then to talk about should we have accounted for it, who cares, just make it go away, fix it, because we need this to be back and operational. So in terms of, and it's funny, Jesse pulled me aside and said, you're giving me this document, right? But it's truly to say, hey, here's all of the things that we validated for to say we would do. We have a list of like 50 below the line of here's everything else we did. And potentially we should have accounted for it when we validated it. But because we were moving so fast and we had to account for it, it was, no, the right thing to do is just to account for the other 50 items within the budget we needed to continue to make the project moving. And in a lot of cases, there are unforeseens that the contingency ended up capturing and accommodating for anyway. So yes and no. What Rob and I from the city are currently doing is financially reconciling the job of how much money is left in the portfolio to go back and get reinvested. So there is money left over. We didn't spend all the contingency. By our estimate, we're kind of between $1 million and $1.5 million right now, kind of unspent funds that can now be reallocated. So good news all around in that cases, but yeah, we ended up adding a $1.2 million washrooms that we can go check out on a tour. The washrooms, they're not super sexy, but they're washrooms. But that was kind of one of the big items. There's also a few, I'll call it shelf-ready projects that while the team was here, we validated for. We have an entire project built for when the city or Explore Edmonton or whoever kind of gets more money. Hey, here's a concession renewal that's ready to rock whenever you have some funds available and you have a window at all, et cetera. But eventually we did draw a line in the sand somewhere saying, hey, we can't fix every square inch of this building or it's going to be fully gray.
So the opposite case of this, so imagine this project, if it was executed as a traditional design bid build. And we'd be working with a budget during design without the aid of constructability input. We would have either undershot the budget to be safe, the spend, because we needed to be very careful, or we would have succumbed to the unforeseens and would have had a budget overage. And all of this would have taken a lot more time. So in this particular case, you had this correction of costing ongoing along with your scope, and you're converging on your finished product much faster and much more efficiently than a long design bid build process for a similar project like this. I mean, that's not every project, but in this one, yeah, for sure, this had a lot of efficiencies that I could see as from a design point of view, having done it in the traditional approach.
Thank you.
Are you guys all, if you're ready for a tour, ask the whole family, how many are planning to attend a tour?
All right.
I think so.
Let's go for it.
Is that for kids?
Absolutely, yeah. And like you said, we can answer questions as we're walking around.
I'll take it, you can go to the last slide and just thank you all for coming, and thank you for the panelists for joining us today. No, appreciate your time, and it's fantastic. Looking forward to the tour. So yeah, please come join us. Maybe let's congregate 5 minutes with lots of extra cookies.